Today, I'm going to turn this into this. So I have these colored lights around the corner of the room there that they change color, and they are off of a spool that looks like this. And these are 50/50 surface mount multicolor LEDs, all on a strip. Powered by 12 volts. Power supply is recommended near the 5 amp range. And I've put them in these aluminum extrusions. And they come with a controller. And I will show you. Looks like this. And a remote that looks like this. I'm going to put them in the aluminum extrusion, show you how I did it, show you how to do the wiring, and let's get started. This project will require some technical skills. You should be able to use a solder pencil and a razor blade, preferably with the ability of not burning yourself and without cutting yourself, because do not try this at home. I'm a trained professional and I care about your well-being. The materials needed for this are a roll of the LED lights, and I got mine in a kit. And if you guys want, I can put the Amazon part number down in the comments or in the description. But this guy comes with the power supply, with the adapter, the controller, the remote, and the wall brick. And this wall brick is 12 volts at 5 amps. So I should be able to run quite a few LEDs off of it. I also got some ways that I can connect multiple sticks together, because I want to put several sticks around my office. And I normally have tons and tons of electronic components out in my workshop, but for some reason today I can't seem to find what I was looking for. So instead, I've got these machined pins, and they are the crimp style pins that you'd put in a D-sub connector, female side. And I got a couple male headers, and these male headers are what I'll use to connect these together. Now on the stick that I made, I wanted to be able to connect these end to end around the office. So I needed a way to get the wires out of both ends, and I didn't want to deal with having to fight with polarized plugs. So I put female plugs on both sides. And what I've done is I've used a little bit of shrink tubing to insulate the plugs, so they can touch each other without shorting anything out. And I used the clear so that you guys could see what I was doing. I also got some 4-conductor cable in black, red, green, and blue. And this is what I'll use to connect the sticks together. So the tools you'll need for this, or the tools I need for this, were some 60/40 solder used in electronics. And this product contains lead, a chemical known to some states to cause cancer and birth defects or other reproductive harm. So anybody who's dealt with electronics, deals with solder, knows this is 60/40, tin and lead. It is not silver solder. If you can use silver solder, I recommend it. That way you don't have to deal with lead. Anything with lead in it, to be on the safe side, you can use gloves to protect yourself, or you can wash your hands thoroughly. Keep in mind that I'm not going to use gloves today, just because I've been working with lead solder for so long, it probably doesn't matter anymore at this point. But I will definitely be washing my hands thoroughly afterwards. I have a very sharp razor blade that we will use for cutting the insulation off of the LED strip, as well as cutting the shrink tubing once we've shrunk it down. A good sharp pair of side cutters. These are specifically for cutting electronic components. They are very sharp. If you don't have side cutters, it's not a big deal. You can use some good old scissors. I've got a heat source, a lighter, that I'll use for shrinking the shrink tubing. And because the extruded aluminum comes with two ends, I need to put a hole like this into this one. So to do that, I'll use a solder pencil, a gas-powered solder pencil, and I will heat it up and use it to punch the hole, and then I'll use a good knife to clean up the hole afterwards. We'll need a bit of super glue, and I think that's about what we need to get started. A good solder pencil. I've got my solder station over here that I'll be using. So I bought these extruded aluminum pieces to house the lights, and the lights I'm using are all on a roll like you saw previously, like this. But if you look at them individually, what you have are three 50/50 surface mount multicolor RGB LEDs, a couple resistors to control the current through each channel of the LED, and they can be cut in these segments holding 3 per LED. And what we want to do is, if you look closely at the roll, this is a 5-meter roll, so there are actually 5 1-meter sections on here. So if I roll it out a ways, you can see right there is where 2 segments were soldered together. But if I go to the next one, you can see that I could cut it there and solder it to another piece. Now, I want my pieces of channel to be standalone, so I can move them and relocate them and change my office around if I want, or hang them in different places, or use them by themselves, or link them up in a big chain. But what I need to do is unroll 1 meter of this to match the 1 meter of this. So you just take the end, approximate it, get it lined up, and we have 1 meter. And you'll see right there, almost like magic, is one of the solder joints. Where 2 pieces are put together. We're gonna break it right there. Now, what I have come to find out with these is that the tape being cut exactly 1 meter, and with the aluminum extrusions being exactly 1 meter, that it's almost too long. So we have to trim it just a little bit further. So once I've measured out where I want the length to be, where the break point is, the solder joint, we come to find out that the length of the tape is exactly the same length as the extruded aluminum. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this. I'm cutting it directly on the solder joint. We're going to trim it again. It's going to get trimmed a second time. I'm going to take my roll of tape and set it aside, because I've got my 1 meter piece here now. And you'll see where I cut it is, see if the camera will focus, is directly on the solder joint. In any case, if we lay it in the aluminum extrusion here and line it right up with the end, so go to the other end of it after it's been pulled tight. And I haven't taken the backing off of it yet. This type has sticky, double-sided sticky tape, but you'll see that it sticks out. So you can see how it sticks out past the end of it, and obviously that's not going to work for us. So what I ended up doing is, now that I know what I want, I'm going to trim it just to where the letters are. Now this tape has lettering to show where the positive, the green, the red, and the blue channels are connected on the solder. It's got the silk screen on it. So I'm going to take the side cutters, I'm going to cut it right at those letters, basically removing all of the contacts. Now I don't want to go any further than the contacts themselves. So I've basically cut right where the copper stops. Okay? I'm going to do the same thing to the other end. Right where the end of the copper is. And that should make it just about exactly the same length as my extruded aluminum. Line this end up lay it out, and sure enough, I now have about a millimeter or so that doesn't stick out either end, which is perfect. That's exactly what I want. Now, because we do that, we're not going to connect our cable to these ends. We're actually going to connect them to the next set of terminals right there. Okay, those copper strips right there. So I'm going to take a razor blade and I'm going to very carefully remove the silicone layer over those. Now, this one has, as you can see, it's the waterproof kind, so I could put it outdoors if I wanted, and you can see the backing there. So about where the letters are that tell you what channel each of the channels are, I'm going to come in at just a little bit of an angle with the razor blade on both sides, and I'm going to remove that. And what I'll end up with is something that looks like this. You can see right here, it's not quite as reflective as over here. So right here is where I've already cut the insulation out. And by doing this one, I learned something very interesting. It's difficult to get the insulation out, and I wasn't anywhere near as patient as I should have been. And I actually cracked the terminals on this side, the pads. As I was trying to get the silicone insulation out, I snapped the pad, the copper pad, and that made one of the green channel on here not work. And I was able to patch it by dropping some solder on those pads, or tinning the pads is what the term is. And after tinning the pads, the LED on that channel started working, and it wasn't a big deal. But by doing this, I've learned that once I've removed that layer of silicone, you can tell that it's really thin circuit board material, flexible board. So what I want to do is tin it while it's still flat against a solid surface, and the tin will provide additional support. The solder that we put there will provide additional support, which will prevent it from cracking as we bend it. This is an exercise in patience, so a little bit of skill, a lot of time, and you should get it. So let's move to the next step. Okay, so you can see here where I've cut it. And this is what an uncut one looks like. Now, I don't want to cut, when you cut it, you don't want to cut too far over this way, because you'll damage the traces underneath here. And you don't want to cut too far this way, of course. They would like you to cut right down the middle, but I found by cutting it right down the middle, I couldn't get it to lay in the extruded aluminum comfortably. So I kind of risked it a little bit, and I cut right where the lettering is. And it's a very clean cut. And you want to make sure that you cut it with a really sharp tool so you don't disturb the traces, the little wires that power the LED modules. So I'm going to grab my razor blade, and we're going to try to cut this without cutting my fingers off. And I'm going to try to show you how I did it while this camera is really right in my way. So take your time. This is absolutely an exercise in patience. If you cut too deep, you'll cut through the traces and ruin the module. You can always patch other modules in if you had to, but if you just take your time and be patient, and I know it's hard to see. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus again. But you can see where I'm cutting right over the top of the letters. And I'm sorry that the camera is gonna go out of focus while I do this. So get down inside there, and then put your finger behind it to support it, and just bend it a little this way, and put just a little bit of pressure on. And now I can, if you hold it like that, let's see if the camera will focus there. I'm gonna run the blade just gently through here, and because I've got it bent like this, I am slowly cutting the silicone away, and because it's under pressure, it peels back and reveals another layer. And if I just take my time, you can see the focus there. There. You can see that it's peeling back as I cut it. So I'm going to go a little further on this one. Again, just take your time. Be very careful that you don't cut yourself as well. I'm not putting hardly any pressure. I'm letting the razor blade do all the work, and I can actually feel when I'm getting down to the bottom. Now, I don't want to go all the way to the bottom because I'll cut the traces and that'll ruin the strip right here. But there, you can kind of see I've gone all but a little ways. Now, if I grab it just by the edge, just peel that up just ever so slightly on both sides. And like I said, it's all a matter of just being delicate with it. I'm going to give it a little encouragement right there. Right there. But if you just take your time, just run your thumb against it, you can see the silicone is starting to peel away. Okay. Alright, so peel it back using those cut lines to kind of control where it breaks away. About like that. Okay, so I got a little cleanup to do. And I'll just grab it from this side and go that way. Okay, about like that. Now, get the solder pencil going here. Put my garbage in the garbage. Get my solder, 60/40 solder, silver solder if you can find it. And I don't want to ruin my desk, so I'm going to use the razor blade as a heat stop. Alright, now for solder pencils, for those of you that don't know, you want to file them down to where they're about a screwdriver shape. Okay, so it comes down to a point. The edges, the left and right edges are a little less filed than the front and the back, and the front and the back are filed down to there, you can kind of see it a little better, to a point. And you always wet the solder, pencil with some solder. Put a little bit of excess on there, and that helps clean all the oxide and all the garbage off of there. Okay, and then use a wet sponge. If you have a solder station, you'll have a sponge. This is, let's see if I can show you. That's what a solder station looks like. So you just wipe the solder off, and then see if I can get my camera back where it was. There we go. And there it goes. Nice and shiny. I got some garbage on it, so I'll wipe that off. Now, so I'm using the razor blade as a heat stop, and this takes a little bit of practice. I'm going to take the solder and put it on these pads, and I'm just going to scratch some of that silk screen printing off that pad. I've just put a little bit there and a little more right here. I got 4 pads, so we're going to tin all 4 pads, and this will provide a little bit of strength to these so they don't crack like I had. If you get a little too much, if you find that, let me see if I can make it do it. If you find that you get 2 joints that touch each other, you can wipe the solder pencil off on the wet sponge, and you can run the solder pencil back and forth a couple times, about like that, and that usually breaks up any joints. And the joints happen because there's flux, and the flux is what makes the solder flow. And it's important to have a little bit of flux. Now most solders have flux in the solder itself, and most flux is just tree sap, but it breaks down the surface tension on the solder. It lets it flow where we want it. So this is what we want. You can see there in the center there's a bit of silk screen on this one right here that's separating the pools, which is fine. It's not going to hurt anything. But if I take the hot solder pencil and I just kind of rub it back and forth, it'll burn the ink away. It'll burn the ink away. If it's not if it is silkscreen, if it's something else, it won't. And there we go. Now, we're going to use these later, but we're going to leave them like this. Not too much, not too little, but it gives them good exposure. Now we'll do the same thing to the other end. And I've about cut all the way through. So I'm not cutting all the way down to the flexible circuit board. I'm just cutting down to where I can feel that it gives. Okay, so I know there's about 1 millimeter's worth, maybe 2 millimeters worth of silicone still underneath there. It's not much. Let's see if you can see from that direction. So you can see it's not quite all the way through, but it's close. I don't want to go all the way through, so I'm going to do this one now again, supporting it with this finger and pushing it back and holding it. Okay, so now we're going to take our prepared piece of LED and we're going to lay it in our extrusion, and we're going to tack it down now because this is where it's going to be. So these extrusions are really sharp, and this is kind of my workstation, so I'm not worried about a couple little scratches, but you should probably put something down like piece cardboard or something, so that you don't ruin your desk or your worktop, because this stuff will scratch. I've already got a ding from a piece right here. So I'm taking the end and lining this end up, and then using my thumb just kind of laying it down inside here. I haven't taken the backing off yet. What I'm doing is I'm centering this in the extruded aluminum. Center it left and right, because that's where I want it. I'm kind of laying it where I want it without taking the backing off yet. Okay. So, using one hand, kind of hold it in place, and using the razor blade, just kind of get the backing to let go. Okay, so I know it's hard to see, and I'll fix that in a second, but you can see I've kind of pulled the backing away, and it's just sitting right there. Now, if I just tack that right there, check one more time that this is centered where I want it, that'll work. Okay, so then I'll show you what I'm going to do here. Pull the backing out a little bit at a time, press it down. Pull the backing out a little bit at a time, and press it down. And just work your way all the way down the edge. Okay, so I've taken and cut a couple pieces of wire here. of our ribbon cable here, and it is about 8 inches long each. It doesn't have to be exact yet. We can adjust the length of it as needed. And what I'm going to do is I am going to attach our ribbon cable to these points. And if you look, it tells you what to connect. So there's our positive 12 volts, our green channel, our red channel, our blue channel. So we're going to connect that there. So I kind of need to prep the cable a little bit to do what I want to do with it. So first thing I'm going to do is I want to split it there, because I need it to be able to go into one of these end caps. And the hole isn't quite big enough. Now I could drill it out, and I probably would drill it out, but I'm gonna use it like this time. And then the next thing I'm gonna do, so that I can actually work with this, is split it right here. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the sharp edges, putting them right between the two pieces of wire, just putting a little nick right there, and that's usually enough to get it to split like that. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Okay, so that gives me my wires. I'm going to prep these up, get them halfway ready to go, and show you what's next. Okay, so I'm going to take this nice big heavy roll of solder, and I'm going to set it right here and kind of lay these out, and then using a solder pencil I'm going to tin the wires, which will keep them from fraying, or will help prevent them from fraying while we solder them up to that. Now, I'm only going to use about half of the wire. I have intentionally stripped it further than expected because I'm going to cut the ends, and after tinning them, by cutting them, I get a nice square edge. So let's get them tinned up. So these are tinned now. I'm going to cut them so that they're nice and flush. Okay, see how they're tinned? And I'm just going to take my side cutters and snip. And this gives me just kind of a neat, clean end of the wire to work with. About like so. Alright, so we've got... So what I had done is I didn't want to solder it this way, because if I solder it this way, I'm going to block those LEDs. And I could probably solder it and split it up here in this way, but I'm afraid if I solder it this way and then put a big bend in it, that it's going to put a lot of stress on the board, on the traces, and the traces could come off, and then I've ruined a piece of the LED channel, or the LED strip. So what I ended up doing is soldering it on this direction, and then because this space right here is open, I can fold it over and run it down the ends of these channels. Okay, so let's do that. Alright, so let's do the first one first. And I found that if I fold that over right here, kind of put a 90-degree bend in it, that I could kind of get in there flat. So about like that. Okay, so here comes the fun part. Clean the excess solder, and Get that green wire out of the way. Here we go. And because we've got enough solder on the wire and on the pad, it will solder into place before it gets hot. So, I mean, my fingers didn't even get warm for that one. But I do have a little experience with this, so don't burn yourself. I'd appreciate it if you didn't burn yourself. If you don't know how to solder, maybe you know somebody who does. If you don't know anybody that knows how to solder, you insist on doing it yourself, do a little practice. Get some paper clips and some Vero board. If you know what Vero board is, leave a comment. I'll tell you what it is, tell you where to get it. But you can do some practice soldering if you have the interest or inclination to do so. Okay. Now, when you're soldering, you don't want to pull on the wire right away. It takes the solder just a little bit of time to cool off enough to make a good joint. And if you've soldered it right, they should be nice and shiny. And it's hard to tell in this light, but if you have a solder joint that's more gray and the others are real shiny and bright, that's called a cold solder joint. You're going to want to resolder it. It's just a matter of touch it with the solder pencil, or maybe even add just a little bit of flux. Now I'm going to put my thumb here to support those while I flip this over. Okay, about like that. Now I need just a little more out here, so I'm going to split these just a little bit more just to get this cap out of my way. Alright, now you need to be very careful about supporting these wires and these pads. Now I'm pushing on this in such a way, I am kind of stressing it a little bit, but if I'm careful and I have a little experience with this, I can kind of know how much I can push on it before it'll break. But I'm going to put this wire down in this track like that, and I'm going to put this wire up in this track about like that when I'm done. And then we've got our 4 wires that we need, and they'll be out of the way. And because of the way I bent them, these LEDs don't get blocked. If I had gone straight out that way, this LED would have been covered up, or I would have had to put a lot of stress on it. So, and I'm sorry for the focus. It's hard for this camera to focus in on that. Alright, so next step, we're going to get this laid out where we want it, where we know we'll be in good shape. I'm just going to use a screwdriver as a little bit of a pushing tool, and I want it to be in this crevice here. Now it won't fit perfectly because it's just not the right size, but I'm going to kind of put the blue wire down in there, with the red wire just kind of sitting on top. So it's going to look like that. Alright, and this is where the super glue comes in. Okay. So let's grab the super glue and we'll continue. Okay, so with super glue, less is more. So we're not going to want to use a whole lot. And because I know I'm going to put the blue wire on this side of the channel, I'm going to try to focus the super glue into there. Now I'm not going to glue all the way to the end because I need the wire to flex down on this end to get out of the connector, out of the end cover. So I know my hand's in the way, I'm sorry, but let's see if I can just drop a couple drops of glue in here and kind of smear it around. Like I said, less is more. I'll set that aside. This is one of those times where you'll appreciate wearing gloves. Alright, we'll give that a little push. Let's see if I can get that down. There it goes. Alright, give that just a second to set. And then we do the other side. Okay, so as you can see, this one's got a hole in it for the cable to go through. We've already put that one on the other end of this one, of this. And the other pieces that come with don't have a hole in them. So I decided I could drill it out, but again, I'm kind of doing this quick and dirty today. So I'll put them together, handy dandy Sharpie, and we transfer a mark to show where we're going to put the hole. About like so. And then we will take a solder pencil and get it warmed up. Give it a second to get hot. And this black mark will be our guide. Use caution, it's hot. But we're going to use the nice hot tip on the solder pencil for creating a hole on the other end for our cable. That way we can have a cable to go in and a cable to go out. And we can hook more than one. In my case, I'm going to hook 2 or 3 of these up together in a row. So I need both of them to have holes in them, but it only comes with the 5-pack of extruded aluminum only comes with enough of these ends with holes in them to put it on one end. So in typical field service fashion, we are going to make it work. Almost not quite hot enough. We don't want the solder pencil to get like blazing hot. We just want it to get it hot enough to melt the plastic easily. If it gets too hot, the heat will spread into the part and deform the part. So you just want it hot enough to melt plastic. Just about like that. Let's see if I can move to where you can see the white. I know the white's hard to see. So we get started on that end and then flip it over. And you can see I've got just the start of a hole there. So do it again from this side. Get it. So, using the knife very carefully, just kind of peel the corners up on this. So I'm just getting under the edges of it, peeling it up like that. I can about pull it off afterwards. I got my blue at the top and my 12 volts at the bottom. We're going to do the exact same thing that we did on the last end. Using my fingers, I'll hold this here and kind of get this lined up, ready to be put in. So I'm pulling these while I'm lining this up. Now I don't really want to put it together yet because I got to put the diffuser in. So next up, the diffuser. Now there's little pockets that these guys clip into, like that. Just like that. No muscle. All a matter of lining it up. Okay, so we're going to do this side. Okay. Now, I've got everything all lined up on both ends. We're going to test it, make sure everything lights up, and then we'll put the ends on it. Okay, so I'm going to prep this end to put some connectors on it so we can make sure it works. So this does not have to be perfect. I'm going to show you a trick. So I've got a generous amount of solder on here. Take the solder pencil and run it across there again. And you see how I got a gob right there? A big booger of solder right there? That's fine, just leave it for right now. Go over this again. This will help even the solder out. Now, I'm going to wipe the solder pencil off dry. If you look at this one here, with the solder pencil dry, it pulls the excess solder off. Do it again. About like so. Just like that. Okay, just like before, we're going to cut them to square them up, make them easier to work with. Just like that. So I've got these pins, and these are the same kind of pins you'd put in a sub D female connector. These are the crimpable, push them in. I'm using these because it's what I got handy. There are lots of other plugs I could use. 4-conductor plugs that are keyed is probably what I would use. I might update this someday and do that way. But for right now, I'm using these because that's what I've got. Now, because I've tinned this in, it'll be very easy to put these on the end of there. So let's do that. To help me out, I am going to make a little jig. Make a little jig, do a little dance. Have fun tonight. About like so. Okay. And what this is it is a piece of male header. It's a piece of this with a plug on the end of it, just sitting there, like so. And then I'm just using a binder clip to hold it down. So, once more. And to help me out, I am going to put a little solder in these. Now, if you can't get your solder pencil to transfer heat, give it a little, just a little solder on it, so that the liquefied solder conducts the heat better. There, you see it was almost instant. Okay, so these are ready. And like that, give it a second, don't move, let it cool off. And there's the first one. Let's do the second one. Just like that. Never fails. You solder and there's a ring at the door. Oh, you know I'm editing that out. Okay, so now that we've got these all soldered together here, this has got a little bit of a goober on it, and I'm just gonna nip like that. There we go. So next we need to insulate these so that when they touch each other they don't short out. So I'll take some shrink tubing, use whatever you want. I'm using clear just so you guys can see what's going on. And I'm going to slide that over there, and it needs to be about that long. Now I've made it plenty long on purpose. So for shrink tubing I need to cut about a total of 8 of these because I need 4 for each end. So if I lay it resting against this finger, hold it this way, I can cut a whole bunch more at about the same length pretty easily. So put those on there like that. And like that. So when doing shrink tubing stuff, you want it to sit far enough back that it provides a little support. About like so. And you use your flame device. And by the way, it will hurt the whole time you are burning yourself, so don't burn yourself. And you're gonna, it's kind of like a hair dryer. You see somebody use a hair dryer, they move it around, and that's what we're gonna do, is we're gonna provide heat evenly to both sides, and we're gonna do it quickly so that it doesn't get too hot that it actually burns and chars. So we just give it a quick dash, front, back, all sides. If you see smoke off of a spot, move, because it's getting too hot. And we just need it to get warm so that it melts down onto here. Now, you can very easily just take the cutters and nip it here, and you can do that. I do it a little differently. You probably don't want to do it the way I do it. Side cutters work just fine. I do this method just because it gives me just a little bit cleaner cut, and I'm a little OCD about those sorts of things. But I also am very aware that if I cut myself, it's my fault and it will hurt. So now we got these. You can't really see it. Oh, you can right there. So you got that little bit of something right there. Not a problem. We'll take our lighter and just flash it with the heat. About like that. Just enough to get it hot enough to make the shrink tubing respond. Okay, once you have all those lined up, I have this piece here that came off of the end of the spool. So when I got the spool, that was already on it, and then you plug these in, and that makes it, the whole strand light up. And that's all fine and dandy, but for what I'm doing, that's not going to help me any, because I want to have, I took that 5 meter strand and made 5 1 meter pieces out of it. So took this off and put our connectors on it just like that, and used a piece of header to make an adapter. Now, by doing this using these pieces, I don't have it's not polarized. I don't have a left side and a right side that I have to connect to. I can hook up whatever I want because it's connected using that male piece in the middle. So I can power from the left, or I can power from the right, and I can add more pieces from the right or from the left, like so. And then we'll put power on it to make sure that it works, and as you can see, it does. Okay, so now that we know it works, let's close it up. So I'll disconnect that. We'll dress this end up with the same thing. Okay, so now that we've got our 2 ends all dressed from 2 different sticks, we'll use some header to connect them. So I find that the easiest way to cut this stuff is to just nick it. If you just get it right about there, it'll break right on where it's supposed to break. And we'll plug these into here. And of course, you don't want to plug any of this stuff in while it's hot, while it's got power on it. And turn it on. And there you go. But once you get this connected the way you want, you can also slide some shrink tubing, or I mean, if you really wanted, you could do electrical tape, but that's kind of a temporary solution. Best way would be to get some larger shrink tubing and shrink it down over this, and that'll hold it because it'll take the form of it, and that'll prevent it from being pulled apart. So in the next clip, I will show you what the finished product looks like. So here you can see a side-by-side comparison of the two styles. I have just the strip on the wall, which is the old way I had it, in the bottom corner. And you can see the new style with the aluminum extrusions in the upper corner. And what I found was the aluminum extrusions provide better cooling to the LED modules and seem to give off more light. And between the two styles, I really like the aluminum extrusions. It gives it a little more class, a little more style. And the diffusers seem to give off more light. They spread the light out across the room a little bit better than just having the strip on the wall. So I'm really happy with the way it came out. The connections between two sticks are hidden pretty well behind the way the lights are mounted, and all in all, I'm really happy with the way it came out. So I know this was a longer than usual how to build video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy your lights. I'd love to know how your lights turned out. Leave me a comment in the comment section there, and yeah, let me know what you did. Maybe you changed the design a little bit, maybe you did something a little different. I'd love to hear about it. Maybe you know somebody who would like to try a project like this. If you do know somebody that would like it, go ahead and share it to them, and maybe they'll build a set of lights. So if this video was worth your time, I'd appreciate it if you give me a like, give me a little feedback on how the video turned out. If you didn't like the video and I didn't really help you out with something new or different, then give me a dislike. I'd appreciate any feedback of any kind. And comments are always welcome. So with that, thank you very much, and take care.